Hi guys, it's Mrs. Pajoli. I hope everybody had a great weekend. This week we're going to be learning how to solve a system of equations by graphing. So one important thing that we need to remember from this past year is how to graph a line. So that's what I'm going to go over a little bit now, and that's what you're going to practice on IXL today before we actually go on to systems of equations. If you take a look at our first problem here, we have the equation y equals 3x minus 4. So if you remember from during the year, one way of graphing a line is to use the slope-intercept method. And we want to first make sure that the equation that we are given is in slope-intercept form, that the y is by itself, and in this case it is. So once it is, we can immediately go and identify the slope and the y-intercept. Remember, the slope is in front of the x, the coefficient of x. So that's 3, and we always want to make the slope a fraction because we need to know the change in y and the change in x. And our y-intercept is the constant at the end, which in this case is a negative 4. So if that number following the x term is negative, don't forget to bring down that negative for the y-intercept. So our first step in graphing this line is to plot our y-intercept at negative 4. And then from there, we want to apply the slope. So since the slope is the change in y over the change in x, and I have a positive 3 for the change in y, that would mean I would move up 3 in the positive y direction. And if I take a look at my change in x, which is the denominator, it's also positive, so I'm going to go to the right. So from the y-intercept at negative 4, we want to go up 3 and to the right 1, and we want to do that a couple of times. And then remember, I can always go back to the y-intercept and go down 3 and to the left 1 to get some points going in the opposite direction. Okay, so we're ready to graph the line. So I want to make sure that I have arrows at both ends. And remember, when you're graphing, you want to make sure that your line is going through the center of the points. And we want to extend it in both directions, with the last step being to write the equation on the line. Okay, so that's number 1. Let's take a look at number 2. Okay, we have y equals negative 2/3 x plus 1. So this is also in slope-intercept form. The y is by itself. So I can see that my slope is negative 2/3. So it's already a fraction. And my y-intercept is a positive 1. But in this case, I have a negative slope. So if my change in y is negative, that means I'm going to go down 2. And my change in x is still positive, so I'm going to go to the right 3. So from my y-intercept at positive 1, the first point that I'm going to plot, I want to move down 2 and to the right 3. And then from that y-intercept, I can go back and go in the opposite directions and go up 2 and to the left 3. So I'm ready to graph my line. And the equation is y equals negative 2/3 x plus 1. All right, so for number 3, this one's going to be a little bit different because if you look at the equation carefully, you're going to notice the y is not by itself on one side of the equation. So it is not in slope-intercept form. So we need to look at the equation to decide what we need to do to get that y by itself. So on the same side as the y, I have a positive x. I want to use inverse operations, just like I always do to solve equations. So I want to subtract x on both sides. So that will leave me the y by itself, because the positive x and the negative x cancel out. And then on the right-hand side, I want to continue to write this in slope-intercept form. So I always want to put the x term first. So in this case, we have negative x, followed by the constant, and that constant is a positive 2. So my slope is the coefficient of x. I really have an imaginary negative 1, and I'm going to make that a fraction since it's not in the equation. And my y-intercept is the constant at the end, which is positive 2. So from my y-intercept at positive 2, I'm going to use the numbers in the slope. Again, I have a negative slope. The change in y is negative 1, so I'm going to go down 1. The change in x is a positive 1, so I'm going to go to the right 1. So from the y-intercept, I'm going to go down 1 and to the right 1 a bunch of times, especially because the points are so close together. And then we're going to go back to the y-intercept and go up 1 and to the left 1 a couple of times. And now I'm going to form my line. And again, I'm extending it in both directions. You'll see why that's important tomorrow and why I've been kind of saying that all year long. And on the line, we want to write the original equation, not the one we rewrote it as, but the original equation, which was y plus x is equal to 2. Okay, the last problem I'm going to go over is number 4. So again, in this case, I do not have an equation that's in slope-intercept form. So if I take a look at what's on the same side as the y, I have a negative 2x. So to get rid of that, I will need to add the opposite. So I'm going to add positive 2x to both sides. That will cancel out those x terms on the left and get the y by itself. On the right-hand side, I want to put the x term first, which is a positive 2x, followed by the constant, which is negative 3. So my slope, the coefficient of x, is a positive 2, and I'm going to make that a fraction by putting it over 1. My y-intercept is negative 3. Since my slope is positive, I know I'm going to be going up 2 and to the right 1. So after I plot that y-intercept at negative 3, I want to go up 2 graph lines and to the right 1 a couple of times. And then I'm going to go back to the y-intercept and move in the opposite directions and go down 2 and to the left 1 a couple of times. So I'm ready to draw my line. Make sure again you have arrows at both ends. And finally, my original equation was y minus 2x equals negative 3. Okay, so, just a reminder, in number 4, we had a positive slope once I rewrote the equation. So my line went up from left to right. Same thing in number 1. I had a positive 3 for the slope, so my line went up from left to right. But in numbers 2 and 3, I had negative slopes. In number 2, I had a negative 2/3 for the slope, so my line went down from left to right. And in number 3, we had a slope of negative 1 once I rewrote the equation. So again, my line went down from left to right. All right, so always keep that in mind that your slope definitely is going to be a big factor in which way your line is drawn. All right, so those are a couple of examples. I'm hoping that was a little bit of a refresher for everybody and kind of reminded us all of how we graph lines using the slope-intercept method. So it would be great for you to practice some of this on IXL before we start the new work tomorrow. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can just send me a message through Edmodo, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Otherwise, have a great day and a great night, and we will talk more about graphing a system tomorrow. Take care.